Chair recognizes the gentleman from Louisiana. A recorded vote has been called. A recorded vote is ordered as previously announced. Further proceedings on the question will be postponed. Our next item for consideration is H.R. 9592, the Federal Register Modernization Act. The clerk will please designate the bill.
H.R. 9592, the Federal Register Modernization Act, a bill to amend Title 44 to modernize the Federal Register and for other purposes.
Without objection, the bill shall be considered as read and open for amendment at any point. Without objection, so ordered. The chair recognizes himself to offer an amendment in the nature of a substitute. The clerk will please designate the amendment.
An amendment in the nature of a substitute to H.R. 9592 is offered by Mr. Comer of Kentucky.
Without objection, the amendment is considered as read, and the substitute will be considered as original text for the purposes of further amendment. I now recognize myself for 5 minutes for a statement on the bill and the amendment. Our government must be both transparent and accountable to the American people. Laws requiring proper record keeping are vital to both. In 1935, the Federal Register Act established the Federal Register, a daily publication of the federal government's activities, including presidential documents, proposed and final rules, and public notices. In other words, the Federal Register provides official notice to the public and Congress that an executive branch document exists. The Federal Register also provides the building blocks for the Code of Federal Regulations, which makes it easier for the American public to find and understand the federal regulations governing our nation. In 1994, the Government Publishing Office began publishing the Federal Register online with modern search tools and downloadable content. Congress has recently taken steps to make the Federal Register more efficient by passing the Federal Register Printing Savings Act in 2017. However, additional reforms are still needed to alleviate the Government Publishing Office of the 1935 law's requirement to print and distribute paper copies of the Federal Register each day. H.R. 9592 allows the Government Publishing Office to stop wasting paper and money and instead publish the Federal Register and Code of Federal Regulations online and streamlines the process for federal agencies to transmit official documents to the National Archives. And the bill provides safeguards so that backup physical copies are properly stored and alternate publication systems can be established in cases of a continuity of governmental national crisis. Taken together, these reforms will bring the Federal Register into the 21st century and save taxpayer dollars. I urge my colleagues to join me in supporting this common sense legislation. I thank my colleagues, Congressman Higgins and Conley, for their work together seeing these overdue reforms get done. I now yield to the ranking member.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The Federal Register Modernization Act represents a step forward in streamlining how the government retains public records and how we communicate with the public. The Federal Register Act of 1935 was designed to ensure government transparency by requiring publication of federal laws, presidential proclamations, agency rules, and public notices in the Federal Register. With increasing use of digital devices to conduct government operations, an electronic edition of the Federal Register is published each day. The duplication of agency document submissions to the Office of the Federal Register creates unnecessary redundancy and administrative burdens. In 1936, the Office of the Federal Register published 2,620 pages. By 2023, the Federal Register had expanded to more than 90,000 pages. The volume of federal documentation has grown exponentially over the last century, so the need for a more efficient process is understandable. The Federal Register Modernization Act would align with current digital practices of federal agencies and eliminate the need for multiple print submissions. The bill allows for the electronic-only publication of the Federal Register, except for 2 hard copies maintained by the office. By maintaining and improving the digital format of the Federal Register, the office will operate more efficiently, ultimately benefiting both federal agencies and the public. I support this common sense legislation. Happy to yield back.
Any other members seek recognition? I now recognize the sponsor of the bill, Mr. Higgins from Louisiana.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, Mr. Ranking Member, and I thank my colleague and friend, Congressman Connolly, for his support and co-lead on this bill. He and I have had many friendly debates during our time together in this committee, and I'm honored to be able to lead a bill with him. Today, I offer the Federal Register Modernization Act, which originally, I think it's of note, was introduced by our former colleague, Representative Mark Meadows. I offer the Modernization Act, which updates critical pieces of our federal infrastructure, the Federal Register and the Code of Federal Regulation, to align with the technological realities of today's world. For decades, the Government Publishing Office, the GPO, has been required to actually print physical copies of the Federal Register, which has acted as our government's newspaper, informing Americans of government actions. But as technology has advanced, our laws and practices have not kept up. These old practices force agencies to produce and store hard copies of new rules and regulations, wasting taxpayer money and government resources. The Federal Register Modernization Act is a common-sense, good governance bill that updates archaic practices to reflect our times and technological advances. This simple solution eliminates the requirement to print physical copies of the Federal Register and replaces that requirement with a fully electronic publication. May I add that this bill does not remove the original publication of written historical record for our government. That is maintained. It's the duplicity and the layers and layers of reproduction that are removed. This bill requires 2 hard copies of the Federal Register to be kept in separate locations to ensure continuity of government in case of national emergency. Further, during emergencies, it allows the Office of the Federal Register to establish a temporary website ensuring the American people have access to essential information while safeguarding transparency. This bill is not about anything other than increasing government efficiency, saving taxpayer dollars, reducing agency burdens, and ensuring the American people can access government information. This is a straightforward effort to bring our government's record-keeping into the 21st century. Again, I want to thank Congressman Connolly for his bipartisan efforts to increase efficiencies in our government, and I urge my colleagues on both sides of the aisle to support the legislation. Mr. Chairman, I yield.
Gentleman yields back. Do any other members seek recognition? Seeing none, the question is now on the amendment in the nature of a substitute. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. All those opposed signify by saying no. In the opinion of the chair, the ayes have it, and the amendment is agreed to. Now the question is on favorably reporting H.R. One, I think that was just the A&S. This will be the full bill. So this, okay, got it. The question is now on favorably reporting H.R. 9592 as amended. All those in favor signify by saying aye. All those opposed signify by saying no. In the chair recognizes Mr. Higgins. A recorded vote has been ordered. As previously announced, further proceedings on the question will be postponed. Our next item for consideration is H.R. 5300, the GAO Inspector General Parity Act. The clerk will please designate the bill.
H.R. 5300, the GAO Inspector General Parity Act, a bill to amend provisions relating to the Office of the Inspector General of the Government Accountability Office and for other purposes.
Without objection, the bill shall be considered as read and open for amendment at any point. Without objection, so ordered. The chair recognizes himself to offer an amendment in the nature of substitute. The clerk please designate the amendment.
An amendment in the nature of a substitute to H.R. 5300 is offered by Mr. Comer of Kentucky.
Without